And eventually the word detransition just kind of popped into my head out of nowhere. It was like, I went through a transition and then I stopped. So it was like 1 + 1 = 2, right? It's a detransition. And I was like, I wonder if that's like a real word. I wonder if that's a thing. So I Googled it and I found that there is an entire community online, like an entire section on the Reddit website just dedicated to this, to detransition, to transition regrets, to people's experiences of going through this. And I started making some friends in those communities. I started talking with other people who had experiences that were not too dissimilar from mine. And it was just incredible. It brought me a new understanding of every single part of this, from the transition to my feelings around it to the end of it. Yeah. And it was so interesting meeting other people. It just destroyed all the narratives. Yeah. And all these preconceptions that I had in my head around gender, around sex, which really are the same thing. But by that point in time, like when I talked on my personal social media about the regret and pain of transitioning in my detransition, I didn't anticipate this when I stopped transitioning. But they got angry. They got upset at me.
Who did?
I mean, a lot of these people were people from within the transgender community. Like people who I thought I loved, people who I thought loved me, were now turning their backs on me just because I stopped, because I wasn't like them anymore. People who were blaming me for what happened, telling me that I shouldn't be talking about it because I could be hurting other people, right? By talking about my own pain. And I mean, eventually I just stopped talking about it because the response was so cruel. So many people telling me that, like, well, this is all your fault. Only you can deal with this. Stop making other people, stop talking to other people about this.
And now they're saying you're the one who's causing people to kill themselves, basically. And I looked through your Twitter feed, Chloe, just before our interview, just to see what you've been up to, and it just keeps coming, even now. I mean, whoever Christians Are Groomers is on Twitter, it's like they say some of the most awful things to you and tell you to go to hell. You little C word.
Very interesting. He's got a cross with
a Ghostbusters line through it.
A cross being crossed out, telling me to go to hell. Right?
You rightly pointed out the cruel irony of that. But on Twitter,
this was that was the kind of response that I've been receiving since the very end of my transition. Like frankly, it prepared me for what was to come once I started speaking out publicly. Yeah. And when I talked with these other detransitioners and these other people who had regretted their transitions, all those narratives that I was harming the trans community, or that I was rare, that I wasn't significant, completely destroyed. And most of these people who I was speaking to at the time, almost all of them actually, were all adults. They transitioned and detransitioned as adults.
Okay.
But I was different because I was a kid.
Yes.
And it pained me enough to know that these friends of mine went through what they did. But I knew that there had to be God knows how many other kids out there who've been through the very same thing. And I mean, I've always, how do I put this? I've always kind of been the person to put myself out there and not really care about what other people think. But not everybody is like that. Yeah. If I got the kind of response that I got from the transgender community, how are these other kids doing? I felt like I had this responsibility to get myself together. Yeah. And to start speaking up, however that looked like. So what message do I want to bring to American teenagers and their families? I didn't need to be lied to. I needed compassion. I needed to be loved. I needed to be given therapy to help me work through my issues, not affirm to my delusion that by transforming into a boy,
It would solve all my problems. We need to stop telling 12-year-olds that they were born wrong, that they are right to reject their own bodies and feel uncomfortable with their own skin. We need to stop telling children that puberty is an option, that they can choose what kind of puberty they will go through, just so they can choose what clothes to wear or what music to listen to. Puberty is a rite of passage to adulthood, not a disease to be mitigated. Today, I should be at home with my family celebrating my 19th birthday, and instead I'm making a desperate plea to my elected representatives. Learn the lessons from other medical scandals like the opioid crisis, to recognize that doctors are human too, and sometimes they are wrong. My childhood was ruined along with thousands of detransitioners that I know through our networks. This needs to stop. You alone can stop it. Enough children have already been victimized by this barbaric pseudoscience. Please let me be your final warning.
You're a threat. Yeah, you're an inherent threat to something held dear by many people. And yet, you felt, I would say, called by some higher being or force or something that just compelled you to speak up. And I don't know what your personal sort of faith perspective is at this point. I'm not imposing mine onto you, but you.
That's how I feel.
Yeah.
That's absolutely how I feel. I mean, when I stopped transitioning for about a year, maybe even years, I was still agnostic, not quite an atheist, because like once I started getting to my mid-teens, I started feeling as though there had to be some sort of higher power, because humanity is just so imperfect, and there's so many things that we just can't explain about the world around us.
Yeah.
There's just no way that we are the highest, most intelligent beings out there. And I mean, that was something that I didn't really consider myself religious at all until after I started speaking out, actually. There were a few times when, like during my transition and afterward, when it got just incredibly rough for me.
Yeah.
But I felt like I felt like I was being watched over and guided. And it was a feeling that I couldn't really explain for the longest time. But it wasn't until like I started connecting with other Christians, and I think like once I was invited out to speak at a church, when I stepped in, I finally understood what that feeling meant.
It became personal for you. The connection to this higher being.
Absolutely.